Hello. It's been a while. So, first I just want to say that I have kind of been on again, off again, working on the next history and character video for Sasuke and Kasuga. But a lot of stuff has happened in my life between the release of the Nohime and Ranmaru one and today with this speedrun, and there's just a lot that I have to do in terms of reworking the script, in terms of actually just going back through the footage to make sure I even have enough of what I have, and then a lot of personal stuff. I don't want to talk about it right here in this video. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll get like a little bit more of what has been happening the past couple of months, but I don't want to dwell on it too much. I did at least want to explain, like, where did I go and all that for people who just follow me on YouTube, and for people who are only really interested in my YouTube content. So I don't have a scripted video ready yet, but I do at least have this speedrun. People do seem to like my speedruns. My Sumeragi speedrun is still my most viewed video, so I figured, why not do another one? And Yukimura-den has always been a game that's fascinated me in general in the Sengoku Basara series, and very specifically from the perspective of one of the few games that can have pretty consistent speedruns in terms of, generally being able to route things out in a way that isn't going to be too RNG heavy. And so that's what I have here for you all. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I equally hope that you enjoy the commentary on this. I wanted to see if adding commentary would make these more interesting. Please do let me know. So, this speedrun begins where all great speedruns do. Just opening the game in general. So this is actually important to talk about because a large part of doing Yukimura-den new game is utilizing the currency in the game, which are coins. And you get 5,000 coins by having a pre-existing save file of Sumeragi. So that's the main reason I do this. Now, despite doing that, I don't actually start the speedrun timer until Chapter 1, which means neither starting the game nor the prologue are going to count towards my time. Now, since I do that, I do go to the gallery once I beat the game, because the gallery shows the entire playtime since the game has booted up. That way, for anyone who wants that in the prologue to be counted, since I am technically getting a head start that I normally wouldn't have, you'll still get a chance to see that time as well. So there's nothing about this prologue that's special in terms of how it affects the game. No matter how many enemies you defeat, or even if you defeat enemies in general, you don't get any more currency that you normally start with, which is 2,000 coins. With the 5,000 bonus from the Sumeragi file, I'm going to start with 7,000 total coins. So you have to play through this prologue, and there's no way to skip it. So I always just use it as a time to just kind of mess around with Yukimura. I sometimes use it to test certain movement ideas that I may have in terms of moving fast. Out of all these Sengoku Basara games, this one has the hardest time with the actual moving quickly through a stage element. The first Sengoku Basara game, you had speed boosts. In Sumeragi, you can use speed boost inscriptions on your weapons, and even some of the other games that I've messed around with, there are characters who move pretty fast, or just the games in general tend to move pretty fast and have shortcuts in the levels. But these levels are a lot different than they are in other Sengoku Basara games, so you're kind of forced to just utilize raw movement. And so because of that, that's always been a difficulty I've had with routing. I'll talk more about the movement when I get to the first stage, but I just wanted to say that right now because I won't get too much time to really go in depth with it due to the rest of the run. So now that the prologue is completed, I will be starting the timer proper once I hit start stage on chapter 1. There are 10 chapters in the game, so 10 stages. The splits are a little wonky, and I'll talk about that when the relevant stages appear. But the first stage, I play as Benmaru and Botenmaru, which is the younger Yukimura and Masamune. So the main form of movement for both Yukimura's in story mode is this hopping. For Benmaru specifically, just the startup of his dash is just way too long to just run normally. And then for adult Yukimura, for Phoenix Yukimura, it's just, again, in general, faster to jump with him. You'll also be seeing the main attack I use for a lot of the run as Yukimura, which is the spinning kick. This is actually a move that's shared between young Yukimura and Phoenix Yukimura. It draws enemies in, deals a decent amount of damage, and also racks up a decent number of hits, which is important to talk about with the mechanics you're seeing right now on screen with Yukimura-den. The unique mechanic is the Bushin mechanic, so you'll notice right next to the health bar is this blue orb with a kanji in it for 1. So in each stage, any style you pick for your character has these things called Bushin levels that go from 1 to 6. You level them up in each stage, and they just give you boosts within this stage. Specifically, they kind of just work like general power buffs for the entire stage, but you do have to level them up in each stage, and it resets every time. Moving on to Botenmaru, you'll see that I started his section with a Basara attack, and something you would have noticed as Yukimura is that these 6 coins are appearing at the top when I do certain objectives. Each stage has 6 bonus missions, just kind of called 6 coin missions. You get money for doing each one individually, and then you get a extra sum of money if you do all 6 in a stage. And so for most of the stages, I do my best to do as many missions as I can, and for a good section of the run, I go out of my way to do all 6 missions in a stage if the missions aren't too time-consuming. So this stage doesn't have too many time-consuming missions, even though I do have to go out of my way to do them for routes that would technically be faster if I didn't do them. An example is defeating these 5 thief leaders. From an individual level perspective, it's faster to just skip this entire part, but from a full run perspective, since I want to have all 6 coin missions completed here to get the bonus money, I do take the time to defeat them. I can also talk about something that was in the run earlier that I didn't get a chance to talk about, which is telepathy mode. So if you noticed with Yukimura, I picked up this blue orb, and when I activated the state, the entire screen got this blue tint, and every enemy had a blue health bar instead of a red one. So the blue health bar is normally how you get Bushin from enemies, and then the other source of Bushin is from blue boxes. Using telepathy mode, every enemy can give you Bushin, as opposed to select enemies. Another benefit of Bushin is that you do not stagger, and it freezes your combo status and combo count, which is useful for any 6 coin missions that require specific status or specific combo counts. You'll see here that I do use this spinning kick for bosses. Even as Phoenix Yukimura, this is how all bosses are fought, because it places the enemy in a position where it's easy to just consistently loop them. Damage-wise, it maybe isn't the most damaging, but because of positioning, it's the best way to deal with most bosses that I have found right now. So I have 5 of the 6 coin missions completed for this stage. The 6th mission for every single stage is simply completing the stage. So as long as I get to the end of the stage with 5 coins, that means I will have all 6 missions completed once I beat the stage. This first boss fight's pretty easy. The only thing I needed to do that was different was just parry his move in the second phase. And I do that in the second phase because he's a little bit more aggressive in the second phase, so it's just easier to get him to attack you then. So as you saw, I got an additional 3,000 coins from doing all the missions, which meant I got 10,000 total from just that one stage. I won't be spending any of the money until the third stage, so the second stage is just going to be more of just standard stuff. Now you'll see 3 additional characters that I play as in story mode, which are Phoenix Yukimura, which is the main Yukimura, Masayuki, and Nobuyuki. So as I mentioned, Yukimura, again, this jump is still the best form of movement. And this is the telepathy orb I was talking about. The translations I'm using are from the Raindrops website. I think it's Raindrops in Daydreams. If it's not, I'll have a text on the screen saying what the website is. It was a website a while ago of someone who translated Sumeragi and Yukimura-den when they were coming out. I actually think he did Vanilla 4 as well, and so that's where a lot of the translations that I'm using when I talk about certain terms come from. I'm demonstrating here again because I do need to reach Super Fever status, that using Bushin freezes the combo status. This is important because some characters do have a hard time reaching Fever and Super Fever, depending on the sort of moves that are best used to defeat enemies fast. When it comes to large crowds of enemies, Phoenix Yukimura's best attack is just this standard Heavenly Wings into normal combo as opposed to this spinning kick. But in general, Phoenix Yukimura does not have an easy time dealing with large crowds of enemies, so it is a shame that there's 2 missions where I do have to do that, and that is the longest part of those stages, is just doing the large enemy count. So as I mentioned, this game has pretty consistent stages. Like Sengoku Basara 2, 2 Heroes, 3 and 3 Utage, the story mode is the same every time you play it. It's not like 4 or 1, where it's more of an arcade ladder that randomizes each playthrough. So because of that, I've thought of a couple of routes that I would want to try out for this game. Right now this is New Game, but I've thought of New Game Plus. I thought of all coins, because when you do all the standard 6 coin missions, another set of 6 coin missions show up that are harder. And then I've thought about Platinum Trophy runs, because this is the only Sengoku Basara game that does not have a Platinum Trophy that requires you to play for 100 hours. So Masayuki here, his fastest form of movement is this special attack. The only downside is it does lock onto enemies, and so you can't use it to skip certain parts of the level because it's always going to lock on to the opponents. You'll actually see right here, I'm trying to use it to cross the gap here, but it locks on to an enemy right below me, so I end up going towards them instead, which is fine. I still am able to skip a large part of the level by throwing it, but it just isn't as fast as it could have been. So here's an example of what I was trying to do. This is really the only large section of movement that you use Masayuki for, so his movement is pretty much done here. And the same will be for Nobuyuki. So when talking about styles, the way styles work in Sengoku Basara Yukimura-den is they're essentially the weapons of the game. Weapons themselves don't matter, they're purely cosmetic, and each style specializes in certain things. So Nobuyuki here has the blue attack style, which will actually be the main style I give to Yukimura and eventually Masamune in the run. Its main benefit is that when you get the Bushin up to level 2, you deal increased Basara damage to the point where you can one-shot most bosses by just doing Basara attacks, which is how I was able to defeat Ieyasu there, just by doing a Basara attack. There's also other benefits such as increased critical damage and just general increased damage stat. And this special, like Masayuki, is Nobuyuki's fastest form of movement, but Nobuyuki himself just isn't that fast, so it's really hard to utilize any kind of movement with him. But like Masayuki, this is the only real movement-heavy section that I use Nobuyuki. This is the only boss fight that I have to play as Masayuki for. And like Yukimura, it's pretty easy to just loop bosses. Since Bushin prevents you from staggering, it's a pretty good way to deal with bosses, especially if you're fighting multiple bosses at once, or if a boss has an attack that makes them either invincible or unable to be staggered. If you use telepathy, you're able to kind of get past that. You do still have to have good timing to make sure you can get an attack in before that happens. But for instance, in this Nobunaga section of the fight, in his last form, he goes into his slumbering demon form. And when he's in that state, he can't be staggered. But by using telepathy and a well-timed special, I am able to bypass that, which I'll talk about more when it actually happens. This combo is the best way to deal with enemies as Masayuki. Bosses in general, I like the idea behind the bosses in Yukimura-den, but this game is not very well balanced when it comes to how combos work and how, combo scaling works, so it's very easy to just loop bosses and not have to worry about keeping up certain attacks or not doing attacks repeatedly after each other. The only way bosses are really going to get out of your combo is if you accidentally mistime something or if you accidentally knock them a little further than they're supposed to be. So for Masayuki here, for instance, his R1 special, which is the one where I'm summoning that orb, sometimes it interacts with the collision a little weird and Nobunaga won't get caught in it, but... So again, as you saw there, by using telepathy mode and a well-timed attack, I was able to skip the slumbering demon phase, which is useful. It doesn't lose you too much time if you don't skip it, but it doesn't save you time if you don't skip it either, so... But this was the Mitsuhide and Nobunaga fight. Pretty easy, all things considered. The only bit that might be complicated is Nobunaga, but that was a pretty good Nobunaga. The next stage is the last movement-based stage that I'll be using Masayuki and Nobuyuki in, but it's much less movement than in the previous stage, so again, it doesn't really matter that much. So in this stage, I'm also going to be buying Yukimura's blue attack style, and I'll be using money for most of the run to level it up. As you level it up, as you can see, your stats increase in general. Since these are essentially the weapons, they are tied to your character's stats outside of just Bushin levels. So the higher you raise the level, A, the better the actual Bushin skills for each level become, and B, just your stats in general just go up. This stage can be a little tricky, especially learning it. There are specific enemies in specific places that you have to defeat, and there is no map for you to really follow, so you kind of just have to figure things out. And that can be a little annoying. Some of the enemies are obscured and they're in strange places. I would say this is probably my least favorite stage in the game in general. And learning to speedrun it wasn't that fun, all things considered, because when you do learn it, a lot of the purpose of the stage kind of goes away. When you know where everything is, you're not fighting through the fog. The main goal of the stage is to defeat 6 specific enemies for the 6 flags, and I'm also going to be completing all 6 coin missions in this stage as well. 3 of them will be acquired right here as Nobuyuki, which will be defeating a flag bearer in telepathy mode, getting fever status, and then defeating 5 fake flag bearers, which are unique enemies to Nobuyuki's section. And again, I'm taking advantage of just Basara skills in general, which, like any Sengoku Basara game, are good even without the blue attack style boost. So this section as Masayuki is the most difficult section of this stage. So this ninja teleports to different areas of this section, and theoretically I think he's supposed to be going to the same spot every time, but it is RNG. There are runs I've done where he has not gone to any of the places that he goes to in this specific run. So that's one of the reasons I don't really like this stage. It is the only section with RNG. I don't have a problem with RNG in runs in general, but this one is very particularly annoying because there are certain areas of this section that you can just lose a lot of time. Specifically, there are certain ninja enemies that if you get caught between them, they open a force field, and then you have to defeat certain numbers of them to open the force field back up. And sometimes you can have 2 force fields stacked on top of each other, which wastes a lot of time, which is why I used the held down version of this special to attack him right there, because those ninja enemies that pop up the force field are in that part of this section specifically. But all things considered, I got a pretty good version of this section. There were a couple of moments where I did lose some time jumping to areas that the ninja wasn't at, but overall, pretty good. So since Yukimura has level 2 Bushin with this blue attack style, I am able to take advantage of his increased Basara damage, which is useful because one of the 6 coin missions is to defeat a Kotaro clone with Basara, but additionally, I'm able to defeat all 3 of them with 1 Basara attack, which saves a lot of time. But it does involve me getting them all caught in 1 attack, which can be a little annoying. I was thankful though that I was able to do it, and able to get them in a spot where my Basara attack isn't going to accidentally knock one of them out of the way, as that can happen sometimes with Phoenix Yukimura's Basara attack. So a lot of boss strategy with Yukimura from now on is going to be utilizing Basara attacks at very specific intervals with the bosses. You kind of might have noticed it when I was fighting Botenmaru, but you'll notice it a lot more when I'm fighting Ujimasa here. Every time a boss's health gauge goes down and a new gauge starts, there's this animation where they get up, they get a powered up state, and then they kind of push you back. Well, with a well-timed Basara attack, you're able to skip that animation, and you're able to knock them out of that state right away, which saves a lot of time. I'll be doing it right here to show you what that looks like. So because the animation of the boss transition is playing concurrently to the animation of the start of the Basara attack, I'm able to just bypass all of that, which is very useful for Ujimasu's second phase, as he has an attack where he hides behind one of 3 wooden cutouts. And it isn't the most time-consuming attack, but it does waste a good amount of time. So that was Ujimasa. He's very easy. And now that I defeated him, I have completed the 3rd chapter. You'll notice that chapter 4 and chapter 6 don't have splits. That's because both of those chapters are on a timer. They're sort of auto-scrollers, so there's no real way to speed them up. So I figured it would just be easier to make the split speed the stages after them. But again, I got a lot of coins from that by completing all 6 coin missions. And I'll be completing all 6 coin missions for chapters 4, 5, and 6. And then after chapter 6, I have enough money that I won't have to complete all coin missions to be able to buy everything that I need to buy by the end. So both of the defense missions are the only times you get to play as multiple characters at once, but unlike Sumeragi, you don't just switch them automatically. They're on different parts of the stage, so switching isn't that useful, all things considered, other than giving you something to do while the timer ticks down. One of the benefits of the 2 auto-scrolling stages is that they have both easy 6 coin missions, and you have a lot of time to fulfill them. This is also going to be the last stage that I play as Nobuyuki, so I guess I can just talk a little bit about Nobuyuki in this game in general. His main gimmick is that when he hits enemies, they can get trapped in his weapon, and if you use certain specials while an enemy is trapped, he does different versions of his attacks. He can do like suplexes, or he can just kick enemies off, or he can slam them repeatedly back and forth. Nobuyuki and Masayuki are pretty fun, as well as Benmaru and Botenmaru, but the biggest flaw of this game is that there's really only 10 stages to play as all the characters in. And so because of that, you don't get a lot of chances to play as Nobuyuki or Masayuki, and it's a shame, because they do seem really enjoyable, and there's a lot of fun combos you can do with them, and a lot of interesting situations. But because of that, and especially because when it comes to getting the Platinum Trophy, neither character is very useful for the 6 gold coin missions, or any other additional mission or section you may need to do in the game. You don't have much reason to play as them, unless you want to do the Sanada trials with them. I will say my biggest complaint about Yukimura-den, which is shared amongst a lot of people with this game, beyond just kind of the tone of the game, as well as the, number of stages, though I don't necessarily mind when Sengoku Basara gets a little serious about certain things, is the price point. This was sold as a full game in 2016 when it came out, but it definitely feels more like an add-on. I will say Capcom definitely fumbled a lot by releasing this as a full-priced game, as opposed to just DLC for Sumeragi. If this was like a $20, $30 DLC expansion for Sumeragi with the 6 additional characters, and like an extra mode for the Legend of Yukimura, I think the characters and the concept itself would have been a lot better received. And considering they released a 2020 version of Sumeragi with all the DLC, it's clear Capcom was fine still expanding the game despite not making specific new DLC for it. Where Yukimura-den ranks specifically across the whole franchise is that I do think it's better than 1, and I do think it's better than the PSP games, but those aren't really difficult bars to get over. And really the only major benefit of Yukimura-den is it has the quality of life changes from 3 onward. But because of that, it just barely passes those 3 games. But like a lot of bad games, in my opinion, it's an incredibly fun speed game because it's pretty busted. And there's a lot of things you can do in it compared to other Sengoku Basara games. I will say one of the things I do appreciate about this game is the Platinum Trophy is not unreasonable to get. Every other Sengoku Basara game, one of the trophies is literally to play the game for 100 hours and then beat a stage. Or to collect, like, everything in the game. And this game does not have that, which thank God, because from a normal perspective, I could not imagine how I would get 100 hours in this game. The only reason I have 30 hours in it is because of practicing speedrun stuff, but otherwise you can get the platinum in at least 10 hours, probably a little faster. I'll find out when I route the platinum run. So the 2 defense stages have minigames in them. This is the only part of these stages I could theoretically save time in. More so here than the second one, because provided I don't get hit by anything, you can finish this horseback section in about 2 minutes 20 something seconds. I do still finish in a pretty high 2 minute 20 second, but it's kind of the low 20-second range if you don't get hit by anything and you get all the carrots. So part of the Sanada 6 coin missions in this stage is to get 3 carrots and to get an excellent rating, which is really easy to do. I actually don't know how long you have to take to not get an excellent rating on this minigame. So there are only 3 minigames in Yukimura-den, so like only 3 stages that are different than the others. And I will say the minigames for the most part are actually pretty fun. I kind of wish they were expanded a little more. Like, I wish there was a way to just play the minigames in these stages, or if they were like had additional versions of the minigames, but unfortunately they're not there. And so for both of the defense stages, I don't really have much to say in terms of the speedrun itself, as again, there really isn't anything to do to increase the, you know, how quickly you can do it, or to kind of shave off time, aside from, again, not getting hit during this ride. And then in the second minigame in the defense stage, just kind of defeating the enemies a little bit faster, but I'll talk about that one when I get to it. But I am able to get at least 3 carrots and able to finish the minigame with an excellent rating. So in the story of Yukimura-den, you only play as the 6 new characters. The next stage, I will be playing as the 6th and final of the story characters, which is White Cross Masamune. I will wait until I get there to talk more in depth about him. But overall thoughts on just the story of Yukimura-den, both just as a mode and as the story is told, it is not very good. Of the 2 more famous Yukimura Sanada games that came out in 2016, which is Spirit of Sanada and Yukimura-den, Koei Tecmo definitely did a better job creating a game about Yukimura's life and the Sanada clan in general, with a better story and just feeling more like an actual fully fleshed out game. I do apologize ahead of time. This is very unscripted commentary. You've probably noticed a lot of the audio flubs, as well as a couple voice cracks. It's my first time really commentating over a speedrun as well. Or at least recording commentary. I did used to commentate when I did speedrun back on Twitch. God knows how long ago. And I've been thinking about getting back into Twitch streaming, but a couple things in my life do need to change before I am able to do that. But anyways, there's not much left to do in this stage except for just wait for the timer to run out and then complete the defense. Both of these stages do have lose conditions beyond simply dying. That is that the thing you are defending either loses all its health or too many enemies get to it. But it is very difficult, even on Sansu River mode, to like come anywhere close to losing through those requirements. Like, you're more likely to, if you play this game on Sanzi River mode, be defeated by enemies than to be unable to defend the base. Both the defense stages are also the only stages that don't have boss battles. Otherwise, every other stage follows the general Sengoku Basara rule of thumb, which is that the stages end with a fight against a general. Again, there isn't too much to say at this point in this stage. And until it ends, I'm not going to really be able to add much. I'll know when it ends because the health gauges in the bottom left will disappear. And that'll signal that the time has been met and that I just have to wait for the actual stage to conclude. Playing this enough, I'm able to sort of predict that based on just the dialogue at the bottom. I cannot read Japanese. I can read Chinese, but obviously the two languages are vastly different. But, you know, I do recognize some kanji and also just the order that characters talk. That hat movement is something Masayuki can do. It's not fast at all. I've thought about that for aerial stuff, but it just doesn't work. So the next stage, I do buy a style for Masamune, but other than that style purchase, the rest of the money goes into leveling up Yukimura. Because Yukimura is played in every single stage except for that first defense stage. Like Yukimura, Masamune will have the blue attack style, because when it comes to story mode runs, that is the one that you get the fastest benefit from. If you were doing Sanada trials, you'd want to do the red attack style because you get extra damage based on how many enemies you defeat, and there are a lot of enemies in the Sanada trials. Like Nobuyuki and Masayuki, White Cross Masamune's fastest movement is an attack, his forward special. I also need to get fever status here, or super fever status, and again, I will be using telepathy mode because White Cross Masamune can sometimes have a hard time maintaining fever status. So I do go ahead and utilize that to get super fever status, and then also to get the coin mission of defeating 20 enemies in telepathy mode. Like the other characters who fight bosses in this game, White Cross Masamune can easily loop bosses. You'll see it against the whopping 4 bosses he fights in this stage. I just realized just how many he actually fights. Well, I'll be using just essentially the same 2 skills the entire time against them. Against Goto, I do need to finish him with the Basara attack, but otherwise, it's usually faster to just do the skills. I do use this tornado for positioning purposes, because a lot of these attacks are juggling the enemy back and forth. And so if they get stuck against a wall, that can interrupt that juggle. So I do use the tornado to kind of just get them away from the wall because they'll pop out wherever the camera's facing. And then I also use it as a way of bypassing that transition, sort of like the Basara attack that Yukimura uses. I can bypass it with Masamune's as well, but Masamune's Basara attack, the enemy is not considered defeated until the Basara attack itself ends, which does make it overall slower to deal with enemies with it, because even though Goto is clearly defeated, until this attack ends, the game's not going to count that as a kill. Yukimura's does not work like that. If an enemy is defeated while Yukimura's Basara attack is going on, they are considered defeated. There are 2 moments where you will see a boss not get defeated right away, but that's because of special conditions with those bosses specifically. Another thing about Yukimura-den's story in general is the odd choices of what officers play a part in it. A lot of the characters and a lot of the officers just are not in the story mode. So aside from free mode and Sanada trials, you just do not see them at all. And like some of them make sense because some of them weren't like the most important in the era, but there are others that just like Mitsunari as like a modeled character only appears as a boss. And then Yoshitsugu just doesn't appear at all, which is very strange since he's always depicted as Mitsunari's main strategist. Yukimura-den is a game in the fandom that just generally is pretty looked down upon. It is the lowest selling Sengoku Basara game, and as of now, the last major release of the series, so I really hope Capcom does decide to release another game at some point in the future. Because it just kind of sucks that this is, you know, where the series essentially ends. I do have to defeat a couple of these cavalry soldiers. I forgot the word for some reason. Because one of the 6 coin missions is to defeat 25 of them. 15 of them I have to defeat to progress through the stage normally. And then there are 8 when I fight Kotaro. Not Kotaro, Kojiro. And I can use a Basara attack to defeat those when I fight Kojiro. So I do have to go out of my way to defeat a couple before getting to this point, just that 25 will be defeated by the Kojiro fight. Again, as you're seeing when it comes to just dealing with standard enemies, not bosses, just a basic Heavenly Wings into normal attack is going to be the best thing I can do as Phoenix Yukimura. So since Yukimura's Bushin is level 4, same with Masamune, they also have increased critical hit chance, and then just increased damage in general. So when I get to Kojiro, I'm not going to attack him right away. I'm going to lure him into where the other cavalry members are. That way when I do the Basara attack, they get sucked into it. Because Yukimura's Basara attack does suck enemies in. So it is good to use when you're kind of dealing with small crowds of enemies. But it doesn't do a good job in larger crowds. Because as you can see, it's pretty clear the enemies behind me that just were not caught. But again, I'm going to be using this spinning kick to deal with a boss. After this, I'm actually going to take some time to get some Basara gauge filled. So you may have noticed a couple of times in the run that I will defeat a boss and there'll still be some dialogue before the next part transitions. And I try to use that time to build resources. So in the second stage, I got a little bit more of the Bushin levels filled, and here I'm going to open some of these red crates so that I can get the Basara gauge filled, just so that Masamune has some extra resources, because this upcoming 6 coin mission is probably the most difficult one of the run. What I have to do is I have to defeat Hideyoshi before I defeat Mitsunari. This is hard because A, Mitsunari will not get off your ass. B, it's very easy to just get Hideyoshi and Mitsunari caught in the same attack. And C, Hideyoshi has 1 additional bar of health compared to Mitsunari on top of a higher defense. So I have to deal with essentially 2 entire bars of health without Mitsunari getting involved. And that is difficult. Having the Basara attack can help because the Basara attack hits in a line, and usually with Masamune, if the enemy doesn't get caught in the line of fire for his Basara attack, they don't tend to run into it. Bosses will usually wait until it ends before they try to attack him. So having that for Hideyoshi's final bar is usually a good way to deal with him. So if Mitsunari and Hideyoshi both are at their last health gauge, and you use a Basara attack, the game does not consider Hideyoshi defeated first. The game considers them both defeated at the same time. And so because of that, Mitsunari technically isn't defeated after Hideyoshi. So again, it gets really complicated. This was surprisingly lucky how relatively easy it was for me to keep Hideyoshi in a loop without Mitsunari getting involved. But so it's not hard necessarily to defeat Hideyoshi before Mitsunari, but it's hard to do it fast. Because sometimes I would have to do very wild repositionings just to make sure Mitsunari didn't get caught in the line of fire. But now that I defeated Hideyoshi, I can just do the basic loop against Mitsunari. Another issue is that this loop doesn't work on Hideyoshi because he's a heavy enemy, so he isn't really able to get caught in that uppercut. So, as I said, this stage and the next stage are the last time I do all 6 coin missions. And the next stage, since it's a defense one, is a lot easier to do all 6 missions. And because it is a defense stage, again, I'm not going to have too much to talk about. It is the last stage that I play as Masayuki, so I guess I can give some thoughts on Masayuki in general. But otherwise, it's just going to be kind of another generally dull commentary. So, Masayuki, of all the new characters, I think Masayuki is probably the weakest. I understand the aesthetic they were going for, the whole magician idea, but he is a little too much style over substance, especially the way he combos. It's very easy to just drop a combo with Masayuki because he has a lot of erratic movements compared to some other characters, and so it's very easy to just have a boss completely drop from his normal combo. But it's also easy to loop enemies with the normal combo, so overall Masayuki's pretty inconsistent. His specials themselves aren't very good. His forward special is probably his best one. It's very easy to get enemies caught in it, and you can get a lot of them caught. His R1 is okay, but it's usually better for one-on-one, or specifically just to rack up hits. And I don't even remember his L1 in triangle special. That's how little I use it. Masayuki also has the worst Basara attack in the game, in my opinion. It's way too long, especially for the damage it deals. That's actually the main reason I never use it, especially, for instance, against Nobunaga in Mitsuhide, because it just... the amount of time it takes for him to go through it, because he does like a full performance for such little damage. And even though he doesn't have the blue attack style, at that point in the story, Basara damage should still be pretty good. I will say enemies do scale, from what I've noticed, based on what stage you're on. So the later stages, if you don't level up your styles, you will do considerably less damage to the enemies than if you do have them leveled up. Because again, your stats are tied to it, and then any Bushin bonuses also get stronger with each style. I guess I can also just talk about my opinions on the style system in general. So a lot of this will be spoilers, at least of now, if I were to do a Yukimura-den retrospective tomorrow, but that probably won't happen for like years. I have mixed feelings on the style system in general. I like the idea of Bushin, but I feel like the drawback is that the stages don't last long enough, nor are the stages varied enough to really take advantage of it. But I really like the idea of specific level ups catered to the style you're going to choose. Some of them do have some really interesting ideas, like increased shadow dodge windows, increased parry windows, being able to gain benefits from doing certain actions, and, you know, the usual post-Sengoku Basara 3 stuff, you know, increased money per stage, personal inscription styles, etc., elemental styles. The drawback is it's not very balanced, which I know Sengoku Basara games not being balanced, what a shocker. But I will say styles specifically aren't very balanced, because in the other games, there's reasons to go outside of just raw attack builds. I can think of Sengoku Basara 3 specifically. There are certain accessories that are beneficial for certain stages, depending on the difficulty you're playing on and depending on what level you are. But for styles, anything outside the attack style isn't that useful, honestly. Like, maybe if you're having trouble with certain rainbow missions, or maybe if you are having trouble getting level 6 Yabushin gauge for the 6 gold coin missions, you might use other styles. But generally speaking, the best style is just one of the 3 attack styles, which the way they vary is that blue attack style is meant to emphasize Basara attacks, green attack style is meant to emphasize health, so you get increased damage as long as you have max health, and then red attack style emphasizes defeating enemies. The more enemies you defeat, the higher your attack will be. And again, if you do the Sanada trials with that style, you are like one-shotting most bosses by the end of the trials, because I don't think there's a cap to how much attack increase you get from defeating enemies. So I do think some of the drawback is just that Sengoku Basara games generally, like, and this is every game in the series, despite the fact that you can equip health and defense boosts, for the most part, you don't typically need them. Sometimes if you're playing low-leveled hard runs for certain items or certain weapons, again, I can think like Sengoku Basara 3 specifically, you can usually get everything you need for a specific character long before they reach level 100. And so every now and then I would need to equip like defense or health boosts if I was just dealing with a really like annoying boss with a character who wasn't very good. Before I get to that part, let me just explain this minigame real quick. Enemies are coming near you, and you need to use Sasuke shurikens and kunai to defeat them. Some 6 coin missions tied to this is using Kanbei to defeat enemies. It's getting excellent, and I think that's it. Like the horse, you can technically speed this up through well-timed kunai attacks, because the kunai attack is an explosion. So if you have certain enemies on screen, especially those that take more than 1 shuriken to defeat, you can speed it up by using a kunai and defeating them all at once. But anyways, as I was saying, in general, Yukimura-den style system is very easy to exploit, and there isn't much reason to deviate from any style other than if you're having trouble with very specific things and stages. Styles do also take away from a little bit of the customization of the stage, because you can't like mix and match styles, which means you can't get really wacky builds for certain stages. So should there be a Sengoku Basara 5 or even another spin-off game for like a Capcom test or something, I wouldn't mind the style system in theory returning, but they would definitely need to make some adjustments to make it more, I don't want to say expressive, but to make it less busted, to give players more reason to want to switch styles beyond, again, maybe a complicated rainbow mission in a stage, or just a 6 coin that you're having a little bit of trouble with. Some notes about 6 coins and rainbow missions, since I'm talking about them. 6 coin missions, if you do get interested in this game and you want to platinum it, you don't have to complete all 6 of them in one go to get all 6 coins per stage. The standard 6 coins, you can easily do that. But the 6 gold coins, sometimes, because of certain setups, you do need to do multiple playthroughs of a stage if you want to get all 6 of them. And I don't do any rainbow missions in the new game run. Probably won't do any in New Game Plus. Or 6 coins. But platinum, they are necessary. There are 3 per, I think, all the levels that you do actually run through. So none of the ones that are just boss fights, so none of the defense ones. They're just dancing enemies that when you hit them, they, again, like activate a force field, and there's just a special little mini game mission you have to complete. You do get money from them, so I think they're designed to be the way that you get money easily, though the best way to get money in the game is just doing Sanada trials as Kenshin, like, I think like 4 times, and then if you do it 4 times with him, you get all the money you need to buy all the things that you need to buy to get platinum in this game. So I'm going to be defeating Kanbei as Masayuki, because one of the 6 coin missions is defeat Kanbei, and I just don't feel like waiting for him to get to Yukimura. So again, doing the same loop I did against Nobunaga and Mitsuhide. It's a little bit harder against Kanbei because he is a heavy enemy, so some of the attacks don't necessarily juggle him properly. But yeah. So again, I just have to wait for the timer to run out, and then this stage is finished. This is also Sekigahara in this game, so definitely the worst Sekigahara of the 3 games it appears in. It is a shame that Sekigahara just progressively got worse every single time it appeared in the Sengoku Basara game. Because like in 3, there were so many different ones, and not every single Sekigahara was good in 3. There were enough there that you could find some pretty fun Sekigaharas. 4 just has the Western and Eastern Army versions, and then this has this defense stage, so I always feel like Sengoku Basara does a better job building up to certain events during the Sengoku era than it does really like following through with them, so but yeah, as I said earlier, Nobuyuki will not be played as again, and this is Masayuki's final stage. So most of this story mode, you're really just playing as Yukimura, and beyond that, you're playing as this specific Yukimura. So that is something that also is pretty weak, is that I feel like if they had the standard Yukimura as well, so if they did like Benmaru, Sumeragi Yukimura, and then Heavenly Wings Yukimura, there would have been a better sense of like Yukimura getting stronger and progressing through the story. But as is, like, he kind of just feels like he's the same level the entire time. Because I think about like how Spirit of Sanada did do the whole like young Yukimura, late teens, early adult Yukimura, and then like Osako Yukimura has his own absolutely beast of a character. But as you can tell, I don't have a lot to talk about right now, even in regards to just the new game run or any other routing. I guess I can do like where I am with other routings. I'm going to be focusing on New Game Plus next. The next couple of videos I'm doing probably will be mostly Yukimura-den speedruns, just because from the perspective of the time I have in a day, the things that are happening right now in my life, and some of the responsibilities I have. The easiest thing for me to do right now is to just route and do speedruns of Yukimura-den at the moment. And hopefully things will be changing for the better soon for me. But until they do, I'm just not really going to have much of a chance to do another scripted video for a while. That is something that we'll just have to wait a bit. Which mostly sucks because I feel like the money I'm using for my editing software is kind of going to waste, but yeah, that's sort of just, you know, where I am right now in terms of content. So the main thing I have to wait for right now is just for Mitsunari to die. And then once that happens in the story, Sekigahara ends. I've never liked any of the defense stages in the Sengoku Basara games. The only one that's kind of good is 3, because you can finish it faster if you're good enough. You can defeat the enemies quickly enough that you don't have to wait for the timer to run out. Or I think you have to defeat the enemies in general to end that level. So you are able to just defeat them in enough time that it ends pretty quickly, but I guess when it comes to any other speedruns of the series, my overall dream goal is to do all stages speedruns in every game, and then do just an actual all stages speedrun of the whole series on console. Like one giant speedrun of 1, 2 heroes, 3 Utage, because those 2 versions have all the stages for each respective version, 4 Sumeragi, and Yukimura-den as like one run. But that's going to be a while, because I still need to play through Heroes and Utage fully. Hell, if I knew I had the time and the money, I would even be so crazy as to do like a platinum run of the whole series. That is minimum like 700 hours minimum. Because there's 7 games that I would need to get 100-hour trophies in. So that's very unreasonable. It would be absolutely insane. Hilarious, but that would literally take months to do. But who knows, you know. I've done weirder things in my life. Alright, final defense stage is finished. Every other stage from here on out, I will actually be able to do strategies, which is great. I don't know if taunting there actually delayed the timer in any way. If it did, then I know not to do that. So the next stage, I won't be fully leveling up Yukimura, but with the money I'll get just from clearing stages in general, and, you know, little 6 coin missions I can do here or there, I'll have enough to have him leveled up by the end. I actually think I get him leveled up by like the chapter after this. I don't 100% remember. I did this run like a week ago, and I've just been too busy to record this commentary. Okay, yeah, so next level, yeah. So this level is, it's not entirely nothing but bosses, but it's essentially just boss fights, so you're going to be seeing the same looping I do. At this point, my Yukimura will do a lot of damage once his Bushin levels up enough. That is the one drawback of the blue Bushin, is that it does not start off very strong. It gets strong, and definitely by the end of this stage, I'm doing enough damage to the bosses that they are defeated pretty quickly. But until that happens, it does take a little while to loop them. But you can also see just how effective this loop is. I do have to delay it every time I do the spin kick, because if I go into another Heavenly Wings too fast, it's considered one chain of heavenly wings, and you can only do so many attacks in a chain before that state ends, which is why there's like a little bit of a delay between each spin kick. That has its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage, obviously, is that you don't accidentally end your combo too soon, but the disadvantage is that sometimes that does mean a boss can get knocked out of place before you're ready. So again, I'm spending this time with the dialogue, opening up these boxes and getting Basara filled. I'll have level 2 by the time Takeda gets out, which is beneficial because that means I can finish him off right away. So you'll see just how quickly a boss can be defeated right here with just how strong this style is at 29 and with level 2 Bushin. So I will collect some Basara just to be ready for the second phase of Takeda, but otherwise I'm just going to use telepathy mode, defeat these enemies to get a little extra Bushin. That's just for additional damage against Masayuki more so than anything else, because I'm not going to have enough Basara to deal with both of his forms with Basara attacks. Again, just using basic attacks to deal with large crowds of enemies. So, Phoenix Yukimura doesn't struggle defeating enemies in large crowds. That's sort of what his moveset's designed around, more so than other characters. He just has a hard time doing it quickly, especially without a style that immediately gives him a power boost. I do want to avoid these tigers. They can pin me under them, which wastes some time as I have to wiggle out. If I am able to defeat 2 of them, I do get a 6 coin mission. But again, at this point, so there's only... Each style can only get up to level 30. I probably should have said that. Since the style is up to level 29 now, I don't need to go out of my way to get 6 coin missions. It helps, because it ensures that I definitely will have it. But it's not necessary for me to go out of the way. The only thing I can maybe do is level up Masamune as well, but he only has one other stage, and you don't place him that long in it for it to really make enough of a difference. So with Takeda here, and the same thing will happen with the last boss of the game, even though his health is down, I do have to hit him to initiate a clash in order to actually end this section. Which can be a little annoying because if he blocks the attack, it doesn't count. So... if I had Basara, I could interrupt Masayuki's ultimate that he does there, but I don't. So I just use that time instead to fill up the gauge for the second phase. I'm a little curious about doing this stage again and getting him against the wooden wall, against like the gate. Because when I do the Basara attack at the phase shift, he doesn't lose all of his health. And I don't know if it's a positioning thing or if it has to do with just Masayuki specifically in this fight. So I'm a little curious about that. So the best time to do that is as the orbs are coming to you. If you do it too early, too much of the attack gets eaten up by the animation, and if you do it too late, the animation plays out anyways. And for a lot of bosses, they will just jump out of the way. So as you saw there, one of the drawbacks of doing this attack is that a boss can sometimes just go wildly out of range for you. Thankfully, I was able to get to him before he recovered, but there are some times when I do the run that bosses will recover, and for Masayuki in this fight specifically, that's annoying because he teleports away. there's really no benefit to collecting these things at the end of a stage, so I'm kind of just killing time. So now Masayuki's not in the story anymore, and it's just Yukimura and the Osaka campaign for the remainder of the story. This next stage is my favorite stage in the game, from a casual perspective, not so much from a speed perspective. I think the Sanada canon is really fun. My favorite minigame is in this stage, and overall, it's the only stage that really feels like a Sengoku Basara stage, in my opinion. So the best way to defeat these turrets or these cannons, is to use the Sanada cannon. You can also use it to defeat enemies. And if you are in telepathy mode, you will get all the Bushin from them. Which I'll do at a couple moments, because I do want to be as leveled up as I can to deal with Tadakatsu. Just because Tadakatsu is, I don't want to say he's the hardest boss, but he's the hardest boss to do fast. Also, if you get too close to those cannons at certain points, you have to wiggle out, so I did lose some time there. But the issue with Tadakatsu, and I'll talk a little bit more about it when I get to him, is just the way his hitbox works. But otherwise, just kind of hopping around and using the cannon to deal with enemies and to deal with cannons. If I use the cannon too much, it'll overheat. And the amount of time it takes for it to cool down is longer than if you just kind of wait for it to go a little past halfway to get another shot in. Anytime there's a stage transition, or the end of the stage, I will just go ahead and let it go into being overheated, because both with the minigame and the end of the stage, it doesn't really matter. With the minigame, it gets reset afterward, and with the end of the stage, well, the stage is over, so I'm not going to be using it anymore. An easy 6 coin mission I could do, also some additional Bushin, comes from defeating Goto here. But it's a little tricky to do purposefully with the amount of time I have. If Matabe dies, I don't know why I went with both of his names, but if Matabe dies, like right there, you can still get the success of the 6 coin mission in the section with Sasuke. Even though this is the best minigame, casually for me, it's the only one I'm not going to play. Because if you get to the bottom, the minigame ends. It technically ends as a failure, but aside from money, and stuff for trophies, you don't really need to do this minigame. So that's another reason why I like it, especially in a speedrun, because I can actually skip it. Yeah, now Sasuke's dead in this story. So, just have to climb up here, and then once I get to the top, defeat 2 enemies who are guarding the gates to Tadakatsu, and then fight Tadakatsu. So, once I defeat Tadakatsu, the next 2 stages are just pretty much a breeze. And again, Tadakatsu himself isn't hard, but as you'll see, this is the only enemy that Yukimura fights in the story mode that's heavy, and he really just does some weird things with the spinning kick. And I also use the Sanada cannon because it deals more damage to Tadakatsu, but that just adds additional layers of just weird positioning with him. And there's just also moments where if you don't time your attack properly here, you can just knock Tadakatsu out of range of the Sanada cannon. So this is probably the most precise boss I have to do, because if I just mess up the timing at any point, I lose out on some easy damage. But thankfully I don't. Also here, because Tadakatsu goes into a special attack in this final form, I'm actually going to wait until after this to do the Basara attack, because if I do it during, I don't deal enough damage to Tadakatsu. So I'm also going to use the Sanada cannon during the Basara attack. Sometimes, as you saw there, the cannon can just randomly get cancelled by the Basara attack for reasons unknown to me. I have had a run where I was able to get like 3 cannon shots off in one Basara attack, but sometimes it just doesn't work during it. So the next stage is the last stage that I play as Masamune, and it's also the last stage that any character other than Yukimura is used. Not much to say. I don't really have much left with Masamune. I'm not going to level him up. I'm not going to utilize anything with him outside of just what he already has. I just have to do this section here real quick first, which is just defeating 7 captains. 4 of them are Motochika's machines, and there's no quick way to deal with them. Thankfully, they don't take too long to defeat in general, but unlike Motonari's captains, which are just normal enemies, I can't just like plow through them with normal attacks. I do kind of have to take a little bit of time to actually deal with them. I also want to avoid these sunbeams because they can knock me to the ground, and then I just lose momentum and have to get back up. I'll be getting telepathy whenever I can and utilizing it just to build up Bushin levels. There is a 6 coin mission to activate telepathy 3 times, and I do get it, but not because I need the money, just because I want to level up. I have to be careful here because I can actually break these boxes, and so I had to make sure that I wasn't attacking anyone while I was jumping over there, because I've done that before, and then I have to like walk the entire way around the buildings, which does lose a decent amount of time. You might have seen on the roof there, there's an enemy up there. That was a rainbow mission enemy, so if I were to get on the roof and hit him, it would activate a rainbow mission, and I'd either have to wait for the time to go down or complete the mission to end it. So if I were to have accidentally activated it, I would have lost a lot of time. The closest I actually get to that is the 3rd stage. Sometimes you can accidentally hit the rainbow enemy in Masayuki's section. So now all that's left is I have to do Masamune's part, and then I have to fight Masamune's Yukimura. Again, just going to be trying to build up as much Bushin as I can in this section. I can't get to level 4 here. There's just not enough enemies. But I believe by the time I defeat Matabe, I'm at level 4. Which is just more useful against Masamune than it is Matabe. I want to try to stay right by the gate when the 100th enemy is defeated, but I don't manage to do it here. Because the enemies don't like spawn unless you get away from them. So again, just gonna do basic loops. Don't have any reason to use Basara attack against him. I want to save my Basara gauge for Yukimura. And even though I can technically build it back up as Masamune while having those boxes refill as Yukimura, I just kind of, again, don't have much of a reason to use it. I actually don't remember if I do use it or not. Good, yeah, I don't. So, this is the penultimate stage. After this chapter is the final chapter. So I'll give closing thoughts there, both to the run and kind of just to the games in general. I mean, I know I've talked about it pretty much, but, you know, just anything I might have forgotten to mention. And that is Matabe, and the end of my time as White Cross Masamune. And I'm just going to be utilizing Basara skills against him as Yukimura. And I will be picking up this telepathy orb. That way Masamune can't accidentally hit me as I try to get him caught in a loop right away. So the main reason, again, to keep telepathy at this point is just to ensure that you don't get hit by a boss and staggered out of your combo before you can start it. I use the Basara skill there because I have to do this section as young Yukimura and young Masamune. This is actually the funnest part of the fight because I have to like attack him and move him in such a way that I can pick up the Basara refills without like just running out of the way to get them. So I do like that. That's the only... Well, you do kind of do that with the last boss as well, but not as much as this one. So I'm going to be waiting until the final health bar to do a Basara attack, just because then, as soon as he's defeated, the level will end. And at this point, Yukimura is fully decked out. There's not going to be any more concern for resources. It's just going to be a straight shot to the end, utilizing telepathy mode whenever I need to defeat enemies, and then defeating Ieyasu and Nobuyuki in the final stage, which is coming up right now. So when I started routing this, the time I got was like either a little under 2 hours or like at 2 hours. So the fact that I've already gotten this under an hour and a half, despite not really having like demonstrated the path there, is something I'm pretty proud of, especially because I routed this entirely by myself. For Sumeragi, I did find out about the out of bounds glitch from watching like certain YouTube videos. For this, in terms of like what coin missions to do, which ones not to do, the best way to loop enemies as each character, and all that was stuff that I just came up with on the spot and experimented with. So that's something that I do really enjoy. It's one of the few things, not one of the few things, but it is something this year that's pretty simple that I am still very happy about. And you might end up hearing my dog out at some point, because she's kind of just sleeping in the other room, and it seems like she's just waking up. Again, not really part of the speedrun commentary, but there really isn't much left to talk about. After I defeat these guard captains, I'm gonna have to do a defeat 400 enemies mission. Gonna be using telepathy mode to get Bushin as I do it. There's 3 orbs in this section, or there's 2 orbs in this section, and then the third one that I came in with. And so I am able to get to level 4 by the end of this, which is going to make both Ieyasu and Nobuyuki very, very fast. But again, part of the problem is just Phoenix Yukimura does not have an easy way of taking care of enemies quickly without just boosted attack. And on top of that, like, even though I'm defeating 400 enemies, they don't all like spawn as well as they do in like Sekigahara Intrusion in Sengoku Basara 3, where the enemies definitely spawn at a better pace than they do in this area. There's also an enemy in the back corner here I'm gonna get. And that enemy gives you increased Bushin, because that's like what they carry. These are in every single stage, but this is the only stage where one of them is just along the way, easy to get. Something about this game that is actually not very good is you don't have much incentive to defeat multiple enemies. Since there's no experience and since Bushin is only acquired in very specific ways, for the most part, unless the game tells you, hey, by the way, this is a crowd combat game, you need to defeat hundreds of enemies right now, even just casually, there's no real reason to do any of the combat. There's just a lot about this game that works against it as a casual experience. Again, speed experience, pretty fun. Speed running it has been really enjoyable. In some ways I like it more than Sumeragi, in other ways I don't. I do like more of the techniques used in Sumeragi. But I do like this one because there's enough difference in this speedrun in terms of stage to stage that it doesn't just feel like I'm utilizing just like a homogeneous strat the entire time. But next up is climbing up here, and then the fight against Ieyasu. So the Ieyasu fight, I'm actually going to be doing a bit of a strange strategy, where I'm not going to be timing my Basara attack in the last phase in a way that will actually defeat him. So Ieyasu in his third stage has a special powered up state that he enters, and if you were to time your Basara attack at the end of that powered up stage, you would defeat him in one Basara attack. The downside is the fight ends right away. But if you defeat him while he's talking, there's enough dialogue that you have the time to grab a max health and Basara refill. And I'm going to do that because I do want the damage of the Basara attack against the Ieyasu, but I also want a full bar for when I fight Nobuyuki. So that's why I kind of knowingly use my Basara attack at a very specific moment here, because even though it's not going to defeat Ieyasu, it's going to do enough damage that by the time I, have to fight him and loop him, that he has enough, he's low enough health that it's not going to take too long. And I kind of do a sort of a backflip there just to make sure I'm positioned properly. To make sure Ieyasu doesn't accidentally, get stuck out of the loop. So now I'm going to grab this red box right here, just to get a max Basara, and grab this telepathy, so that way I'm not staggered when I attack Nobuyuki. Nobuyuki has a tendency to just attack you during his fight, so it is pretty imperative to use telepathy mode, so that way he doesn't just hit you too much out of your combos, or out of the start of your combo. Nobuyuki's really the only boss that puts up enough of a fight that I do have to be kind of careful when approaching him. I mean, obviously once he gets stuck in the loop, he doesn't really break out, but again, he can just attack me and lose some time, because he does like to kind of back off after he attacks for a bit. So Nobuyuki has an entirely second phase of 3 health bars, and kind of like the young Masamune fight, I'm going to be looping him in a way that I also grab resources, such as this telepathy gauge, as well as Basara refills to speed up the second and third phases. So I'm a little peculiar with that, because if I time this in a pretty decent way, I can deal enough damage that I don't have to grab that right away. It does not seem like that was the path I chose to take, but there is another Basara refill that was a little bit further in the circle that I probably could have gone and grabbed to make this part a little faster, but I wanted to be safe because I did a recording before this one that got under an hour 30, but the bitrate was messed up, so I had to re-record it, and at this point I had beaten the time that I did on the first recording, so I just wanted to make sure it ended at a pretty decent time. Like Takeda, I do have to clash with Nobuyuki to actually end the battle, As you can see here, if I don't do it correctly, the clash doesn't get initiated. And with that, the run is over. So real time starting at chapter 1 is an hour 24. I do believe in-game time from the moment the game starts is like an hour 29. I'll know for sure when I go to the gallery. But that was the Yukimura-den new game speedrun. I did have a lot of fun doing it, and I had a lot of fun commentating it. Hopefully for future speedruns, I'm a little bit better at commentating, and I can do a little bit more with them. Okay, hour 27. So thank you for watching. Again, if you enjoyed, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll be back hopefully sooner rather than later with a new video, be it a speedrun or something scripted. So thank you, and I hope you have a nice day.